What's up YouTube, Dale here from Zephyr, and today I am bringing you the winner of our poll from this week, and that is of course, Pure Synchrons. So as a massive homage to Yugioh from the 5Ds era, I have made this a pure Synchron version. Now there are a couple of non-tuners that will help you kind of facilitate what you need with this deck and make it slightly competitive. If you count those three cards as not technically pure, then by all means please feel free to do so. However, I've kind of put this deck together, it still functions as it should do with the Synchron element. It doesn't involve adventure, it doesn't involve any other outside engine like the Wanted engine or anything like that. It does just utilize Synchros. So, with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. Starting off with your ideal starter for the deck, and unfortunately this is a starter that requires another card in rotation to get it to the graveyard to get the max out of it, and that is of course triple junk Synchron. So ideally what you want to combo this off with will be your junk converter, as this will put a level 2 in the graveyard, or ideally itself in the graveyard, so that when you normal summon the junk Synchron you revive and go from there. Now the one thing you do need to be very careful about with the Synchron version is it doesn't have direct protection or space to place said protection when kept towards a 40 card deck, unlike the Adventure engine from certain types of hand traps. That being said, what you do need to do is you do need to have a huge amount of gas to just keep playing through those particular hand traps until you reach a point of no return. Which is why we're going to be utilising Junk Synchron as our ideal starter. I'm going to take you through all the tuners first and then show you the non-tuners. We're then backing this up with 2 Stardust Synchron. This is one that gives you a little bit more gas, as it gives you that ability to tribute and summon itself down, and then you Foolish Berry the Stardust Trail. But ideally what you want to try and be doing is searching out your Illumination. Your Illumination, rather than sending the trail from deck to the graveyard, you're going to use it to extend further, and that's where the rest of the cards come into play. We've then got 2 Revolution Synchron. So the one thing you've got to be very careful about is getting the balance correct between the amount of tuners you play and the amount of non-tuners, which is why I have a very fair balance of 11 monsters in the deck that are tuners and 11 non-tuners in the deck. And then you have a balance of spells that can search out either non-tuners or tuners, and then you have ones that will directly just search you out your Synchrons. We'll then back this up with the 1 Assault Synchron and the 1 Jet Synchron, and then followed up by the 1 Wield Synchron. So now you have levels 1 through 5 that you'll be summoning off of the Junk Speeder, which just gives you a little bit more flexibility depending on what Synchro summon you want to make, and it doesn't mean that you have loads of different options, especially when you're looking at stuff like Assault Synchron, Jet Synchron, and Revolution Synchron that have other ways to get themselves to the board, whether it be by paying a small amount of life points to summon itself from the hand, whether it be just summon itself from the hand to Synchro and then reviving itself from the graveyard, or just reviving from the graveyard. You have loads of different options to keep these floating, and that's why you need to utilize some of your best non-tuners in the form of Doppel Warrior, because that will continually keep spawning you non-tuner tokens. The last tuner that we play in the main deck is the 1 Hop Ear Squadron. Now you can take this out if you want to. This is just a personal tech of mine that I really do like, because what I like doing is I go through the Cupid pitch, I search Hop Ear Squadron out, so it means during my opponent's turn, as I have put loads of Synchros in my graveyard, I have the ability to make the Satellite Warrior, and the Satellite Warrior will pretty much clear an entire board on its own and make itself a mini fat stat boss monster. So as long as I'm allowed to keep it on the board, I'll be able to OTK the next turn as well. Now it is just a tech choice, so you can cut it out completely if you want to. For the non-tuners, the second best non-tuner in the entire deck is Doppel Warrior, and I kind of class the first best non-tuner in the deck to be Junk Converter. Now, unfortunately, again, Junk Converter is part of the 2-card combo. You need the Junk Converter and then another tuner. So you'll use Junk Converter to send the other tuner from the hand to the graveyard. Ideally, something like Stardust gets you the most advantage. But then you search out your Junk Synchron, you normal summon your Junk Synchron, summon back the Converter, and then you're good to rock and roll. Because from that point on, you then make Junk Speeder, you chain block Junk Speeder from being hit with something like an Ash Blossom, and then you're able to build up from that point on. Now, it is a bit of a shame because, very simply, a Ash Blossom will hurt you, an Imperm will hurt you. There are just different ways that they can interact with you that will be quite damaging, which is why you need that additional level of gas in the form of stuff like Revolution Synchron, Doppel Warrior, and everything else in between. For the other non-tuners, we are playing the 1 Synchron Carrier. Now, the reason I'm playing this is because I am main decking On Your Mark, Get Set, Duel. So this one lets you, on activation, if you control no cards, you get to add a Synchron monster from the deck to the hand. It doesn't need to be a tuner, so it means it gives you the option to get a non-tuner or a tuner should you need it. Then, of course, we've got the 1 Trail that you'll send off of the back of the Illumination, or you'll be summoning it from the deck off of the back of Illumination if you control Stardust Dragon. And then the other engine that technically isn't a Synchro engine, so it's entirely up to you if you want to class it or not, or take it out, is the Magician's Souls engine. And the reason I'm playing this is because I am playing that on your mark, get set, duel. And to me, this card is completely dead from turn 2 onwards. You want to see this where you control no cards, activate it, search out, and then from that point on, in my opinion, it's completely dead. So being able to go, cool, summon down Magician's Souls, send the ready on your marks, get set, duel, draw a card to allow me to continue my plays, and have a non-tuner level 1 on the board is very, very valuable. And if you don't want to play this, the other options you can consider are stuff like the Jester Conflict. You can also consider the Acasta Dawnwalker version. And if you were to do that, I would probably take out on your mark, get set, duel, and then I'd probably look at playing more level 8 synchros. But unfortunately, in the past, when you could utilize the Dawnwalker at its max potential, you really would be abusing the Chaos Dragon. But because that card is banned, you might want to consider playing something like Supai and Dawnwalker, because that can get you into level 6 synchros. Could be something like a Charge Warrior or a Coral Dragon if you wanted to. So again, gives you a couple of different options. Ideally, right now, if you were to play the Dawnwalker, you'll be going into something like an Omega, which can be quite helpful. On top of that as well, if you were to play the Dawnwalker, you'd want to be playing a level 2. Now, I used to play Fleur Synchron, I believe it was, because I would discard that, and then it actually opened up the door to go into the Axel Stardust Synchro Dragon, and then you'd work into Baron de Fleur. But again, for the TCG, Baron de Fleur is banned, so you need to find other ways that you can play, and the best defensive option that we have right now is the Gen X, which I'll talk about when we get to the extra deck. Then for the final non-tuner, I play the one Caligo Claw Crow. The reason for this one is if they do stop your Junk Synchron and you have hard open this, you can summon it down. On top of that as well, it's also searchable off of the back of your Cupid pitch, so it gives you another additional extender that is a non-tuner. So it really depends at what position you are in at that point as to whether you want to extend with it or not. And then that's kind of where you're able to work into either Synchro level 4s, Synchro level 6s, you name it, you can work your way up. Then onto the spells, of course, we do play triple on your mark, get set, duel. Now, like I've said behind this, the reason for this is it can sub itself out as a fourth, technically a second version of the carrier. It can then activate as a second copy or an additional copy of any of your Synchrons, which is really, really important because you can get to an extender, you can get to a starter. It just gives you crazy amount of consistency. And then the fact that you can sack it off for draw fodder off the back of the Magician's Souls is where it really does kind of get the most value out of it. But you can cut it out completely if you want to. It's not a mainstay staple in my opinion. It's one of them ones that if you see it later in the duel, you don't really want it because it does become dead off drawing off the back of your TG Hyper Librarian. But again, it just becomes free spell fodder that if you have got the Hyper Librarian into rotation and you're just drawing, you will eventually get to a Magician's Souls. You just send this as free fodder and draw even more. But then it's up to you. These can be a very easy side out, and that's when your counter traps would come in, stuff like Synchro Zone. You can even play the Vanadium, Visa Starfrost, the Synchro level 8 to get you into the counter trap, and you can also play Gravity Collapse, I believe it's Gravity Collapse or Ground Collapse, the trap card that basically says your opponent skips to the end phase. So you've got loads of different options. That's where your side deck will come into play. Then, of course, we've got triple tuning. This is obviously in here to be able to mill that card but search out any of your Synchron tuners. So the idea is that you really want to be searching out your Junk Synchron and then mill a level 2 like a Doppel Warrior or a Junk Converter. That is the dream land. But considering you only have like 6 targets in your entire deck to mill, it's very rare that happens. It is like unbelievably amazing when it does, but you don't want to be doing it just for that. The mill is like an additional bonus that you get off the back of it, and if it is something that's going to be useful for you, great success. If not, you're just increasing your consistency to get to your Synchron tuners. And then playing 2 Synchro Overtake. You can play this at 3 if you want to, but honestly, again, it just becomes down to fodder off of the back of Magician's Souls once you've used it, as we're only playing 1 target in the extra deck. Now, if you were to play the Adventure version, you're probably going to want Jet Synchron to be a little bit more prominent, so you will play Jet Warrior in the extra deck as well. But for this one, we're only playing 1, and that card is pretty dead in my opinion, and that is, of course, when we get to it, your Junk Warrior. Now, it's very rare you're ever actually going to really Synchro summon your Junk Warrior, but the idea is you have to play it because it lists Junk Synchron. And again, it's one of the ones that if you don't want access to it, you cut this out. But what I like about it is it gives you that option that if they just stop you getting to your Junk Synchron or you don't get to it, your Synchron Overtake can allow you to maintain your normal summon, special summon out the Junk Synchron, special summon down a Calico Claw, and then work your way into the Junk Speeder, and then your Junk Speeder kind of goes off. And if they stop that, you still have your normal summon, so you can go, cool, normal summon Junk Warrior, bring a non-tuner back from the graveyard, and then start working your way up into different synchros. And then we play one of power spells. So you've got your Foolish Burial, you've got your Reinforcement of the Army, and you've got your Illumination. So Foolish Burial can send a Junk Converter if you've already opened up a the Junk Synchron, so that will then give you the ability to revive your level 2. It can be a Doppel Warrior, it can pretty much be anything you want it to be. It can also be a Stardust if you need to get it to the graveyard. Illumination, if you hard open it, does become that Foolish Burial option to get you Illumination or the Stardust, but what you really want to do is bury this, no pun intended, and the idea is you're just using this to get you a non-tuner or a tuner, and then you're using this to set up a tuner or a non-tuner in the graveyard. For the hand trap slash board breakers slash whatever, I've decided to go like full gas with this deck with some form of interaction, because you don't want to sit there, let your opponent go off if you don't win the dice roll, and then struggle to kind of play through it, as you will only be able to play through certain amount of interactions, and if your opponent knows when to hit you or when to stop you, that's when it gets really tricky. So you need to be able to play cards that can counteract that give you the best benefit of, okay, well if I go first, these are going to act as cards that I can set to block my opponent without disrupting my general combo plays. Well, if I don't get to go first and I go second, these are cards that I can either drop on my opponent during their turn, or they're going to help me break a board going second, and that is of course triple Infinite Impermanence, triple Forbidden Droplet, and double triple Tactic Talents. Now it is a 42 card deck, so if you wanted to, I advise or say that the talents would probably be the ones you cut out, but the idea behind this is I want to punish my opponent if they hand trap me during my turn, or if they so if they hand trap me during my turn 0, or if they try to interact with me during my first turn with monsters they've already got on their board, I can then go Talents and Steal, use it as Synchro fodder, Talents and Steal to get it out of the way, draw 2 into my extender, or if I'm going first, I look at their hand, and not only will they have dropped a hand trap on me, but I also get to take away a starter or another hand trap that might cause me issues. This is probably the one that is more flexible, because it is kind of one of them ones that is more situational, but what I like about both Imperm and Droplet is going second, I will have so much, if I go first and I draw into a Droplet, I'm going to have so much like board presence advantage, hand advantage, just by drawing off of the back of the TG Hive Librarian, that I'm going to have loads of fodder to send, and it means that if my opponent does play Dark Rule and no more so for game 2 and 3, it'd be very rare if they do main deck it, I have a way to stop it and deal with it. The Imperm gives you that best hand trap that doesn't trigger off triple Tactic Talents, gives you ability to negate a column if they're playing Floodgates, as well as being able to drop it as a hand trap should you need to. So these are the ones, in my opinion, that give you the best balance to kind of help you break boards and help you kind of, because the other best thing about Imperm is if they've got a negate on the board that can be targeted, during draw phase you activate Imperm, negate it, and then you're able to continue to make your plays. So again, it going first or second, it gives you that nice trade-off. So that's it for the entire main deck. Now moving on to the extra deck. So with the extra deck, again, you've got a bit of flexibility, but I would say most of these really come down to preference, and I'll explain each of their roles. So the brand new level 10 defensive option, I say brand new, it came out in the Battles of Legend, but it's a card that you definitely want to be playing, is the Arms of the Gen X Return 0. Now the reason this is our best defensive option is it does require a Dart Tuner, whereas anything else it doesn't care about. What it does get the benefit of is it allows you to negate once per turn per attribute in your graveyard. So if you've got a dark in the graveyard, you can negate it. If you've got a light in the graveyard, you can negate it. A wind, a water, everything else, you can negate it. I think water is legit the only attribute we don't play in this, because you've got Jet Synchron, which is a fire, you've got Earth in the Revolution Synchron, you've got Darks in your Junk Synchron, you have loads of different attributes that you will cover to be able to negate over the back of the arms. And the way this works is trying to explain it in the best possible way. If I've got a light, a dark, and a fire in my graveyard, per turn, I can negate a light, a dark, and a fire. Only when those attributes are removed from the graveyard will it no longer be able to negate those, but it just gives you that benefit that if you can get a light to the graveyard early doors, you'll be able to protect from Nibiru and then work your way from that point on. As a nice defensive and aggressive option, of course, you do have Chaos Angel. So Chaos Angel gives you that ability to protect all of your monsters, because more times than not, you'll make it with a light and a dark. This will give you the ability to protect all of your monsters so that they can't be destroyed by battle and they're unaffected by your opponent's activated effects, or specifically your Synchro monsters, which more times than not will be the case of how you're going to end your board. Then your all-out aggressor will be your Satellite Warrior. So if you're going second, you can summon this, give it a huge attack stat boost and nuke your opponent's board. Or like I said, with the Hop Here Squadron, you can drop it during your opponent's turn and it becomes a very nice interactive option. So even if your opponent does go Dark Ruler, as long as you've got a level 8 on the board, you go, okay, cool, let you build your board, think you've got nothing, Hop Here Squadron, Satellite Warrior, nuke the board, off you go. For the 8s, we've got Omega. Omega is completely optional. I just like the additional benefit of being able to recycle my Stardust monsters. So more times than not, you'll probably get 2 Stardust dragons into the graveyard, and then you have the ability to bring back the trail after it banishes it for its own effect. So that just means that during the next turn, as long as you have a monster to tribute, which if you do tag out the Omega and bring it back, you'll have the ability to do so. That then opens up the door for another Synchro level 8 that you can work your way into. We've then got Crystal Wing. Crystal Wing is like your ideal defense early doors against Nibiru. You kind of put your opponent in a position where if you can't get to the Gen X, you've got the option to go to the Crystal Wing, and the Crystal Wing will give you that protection that you need. The best level 8, in my opinion, is the Axel Synchro Stardust Dragon. Yes, obviously it's a little bit better if Baron was in rotation, but what this is still going to give you the option for, and a lot of people forget, is that when you tribute it to summon or to conduct a Synchro summon, not only will it allow you to protect the card you summon off of the back of it tributing, so it protects the Stardust Dragon, but it also protects the card that you summon off of it. So if you have the ability to make a Synchro level 5, you tribute this off, and then you have the ability to go into that Synchro level 5 while protecting it. You don't have to use the Stardust that you summon, so it means your Stardust will be protected, and then the monster that you summon will be protected as well, which is another way of being able to protect these junk Synchron if you get the right setup, and that's where the Dawnwalker can come into play a little bit more, as it will give you the ability to set this up a little bit early doors as well. We are playing the one Stardust Dragon, just because I do like the option of being able to trigger this off to get Stardust, and then that gives you a bit of destruction protection as well, which is quite nice, but it also gives you a free level 8 monster on the board that you want to be using as Synchro fodder, should you want to work your way up. Like I said about the arms doesn't care about the non-tuner, it just requires about the tuner being dark, so again, if you have a level 2 tuner on the board, you can work your way into the Stardust Dragon, and that's where, of course, your Assault Synchron comes into play, because your Assault Synchron is a level 2 Dark Tuner. So this plus a Stardust gives you a Gen X arms, and again, if you go Active Stardust Synchro, bring this back, tribute this off, summon out Stardust, and then instantly Synchro summon, and you decide to go into the Gen X. Your Gen X then has another layer of protection that your opponent might forget about, which just makes it even harder to deal with, because you'll have a Wind and a Dark at the very least in your graveyard set up to negate. For level 6, we've got the one Charge Warrior. You can balance this between this and Coral Dragon. I just found that in a pure version of the build, you need non-tuners a lot more than you need tuners. I feel that when you're looking at the adventure package, because you spawn yourself a token, which is a non-tuner, you spawn yourself the Griffin Rider, which is a non-tuner, and then obviously you have the option for the Water Enchantress, which again is a non-tuner. You're covering more of those bases with that version, and of course you've got Reborn Tengu on top of that. So what you kind of want to do with the Charge Warrior is you kind of need that non-tuner that's going to give you that additional draw as well to help you extend that bit further, but it also gives you that level 6 that can then work its way up into a level 8 being the Crystal Wing, or it can work its way up into a level 10, again a level 4 dark, or a level 2 dark plus another level 2 that is a non-tuner like a Doppel Warrior, gets you into the Gen X as well. For the 5s, we've got the one Axel Synchron. The ability to just adapt its level is insane. I really wish that this one actually listed something. I would have loved this card to have listed like Jet Synchron or something, just to kind of make it more applicable to the Synchron overtake in the deck, but it really just comes down to what you have access to. I really like this card. The way to increase its level, decrease its level, just gives you so many different options. TG Hyper Librarian, just draw, 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 and more draws. Then your Junk Speeder, your insanely good card. The downside is that it locks you into Synchros, which is the benefit and the negative of this deck. Like, I love decks like this that do have a card that lock you for the entire turn. Like Branded Fusion, I had no issues with it, because then it meant that Branded was never abused to the ability where they were like, cool, I'm now ending my board on a Synchro, a Link Monster, a XYZ, and of course a Fusion. I like the idea that it's like, we only do fusions, it makes everything more simple, and this is the way we want to play, which is what I like about this. The downside is, all it takes is someone flipping a D-barrier on you, and you're like, okay, cool, well, I guess I can't play. It's going to be even more damaging in a version like this, because in a version like this, you don't have anything else to put on your board. Like, everything else you play is a lot weaker. You could play like that one random Link Monster if you wanted to, but I really do feel that it's just not worth doing. And you kind of, like, the extra deck's tight as it is with this particular deck, because you just play so many Synchros, it's crazy. And then, of course, you've got the Junk Warrior. Obviously, the downside of the Junk Warrior is that you very rarely should ever need to Synchro Summon it. The only time you'll ever need to Synchro Summon it if you're like, yeah, okay, I've got nothing left, I want to make a stronger monster. But you look at all your other level 5s, and you're always going to go Junk Speeder first, Active Synchro second, and then you should, I say second, it'll probably go Junk Speeder first, TG Hyper Librarian second, and then Axel Synchron, and then you should never really need to make Junk Warrior. But you need it because it lists the Junk Synchron. Again, I feel in the adventure package, if you're not playing Overtake, you don't play this card, and it unlocks a space in your extra deck. For the 4s, we've got the one Herald of the Arc Light, we've got the one Cupid Pitch. Again, if you decide not to play the Hoppy Squadron or the Calicrow, you can cut this out completely. I like the fact that this gives us a burn option in time, as you will go through combos that will take you a lot of time. The way the Synchro deck works is pretty much, I will build my board, put everything from my extra deck onto the board. If you can break it, great, that's game, we're going into game 2. But more times than not, you won't be able to break it unless you've hard opened up something like a Dark Rule and no more to turn the board off. So I'm going to be building my combo for about 15 minutes. You're going to try and break it, which might take about 5 minutes or less. Then we go into game 2. If I'm unlucky enough not to win game 2, we'll combo into game 3, and again, that might take 15 minutes. So straight away, it means game 2 will have to take 10 minutes or less, and then that's when time kind of comes into play. So you do need to kind of know what combos you want to make, especially with a deck like this. If your opponent doesn't know what it does, they will be asking you, what does that card do? What does that card do? What does that card do? So it's always nice if you know your deck is naturally a long combo deck, that you have a way to win in time. Not saying take it to time, as this deck is more than capable to win within time. I'm just saying that there might be those options where your opponent goes, oh, okay, I've won game, or like you win game 1, they win game 2, and they're like, okay, cool, we've got 5 minutes left on the clock. The Synchro player is going to go first, but they're probably going to, like, they don't have a burn option, we'll probably take the draw, and you're like, well, no, I've actually got a burn option to win it, I'm not going to go for that, but if time gets called and I've already comboed, I might have that as an option. So completely take it out. You can go for Metal March if you want to. It's just nice to have a card that will help you extend, help you defend, help you interact, adapt its level, and give you burn. It gives you like everything you need from a single card. And the last one we play is the Celestial Double Star Shaman. I just like this as an option to bring back the Doppel Warrior. It then spawns you more non-tuners, and that's something you need in this deck. As I mentioned with the Adventure Package, it naturally itself produces you like a level 3 non-tuner if you want it, a level 7 non-tuner if you want it, and a level 4 non-tuner if you want it. So being able to play a card like the Double Star Shaman gives you that option to get you more non-tuners to the board, and it's even better now when you've got Jet Synchron and of course you've got the Magician's Souls. So it's just cards that you are being able to utilize more potentially with the cards that you main in the deck as well. So work the best with what you have access to, work the best with the type of build you go for. Again, if you're not playing Magician's Souls, you might adapt it a little bit more, and that's where Metal Marcher comes into play. My only issue with Metal Marcher is it brings back, it turns the card that it turns the card that it synchros into a tuner, and sometimes that's something you don't need. Like I said, with this particular version, you need non-tuners, and that's why we're trying to play cards that either spawn you non-tuners or kind of allow you to facilitate more non-tuners to the board. And that's what I really like about Synchros, is it does make you really think, as it can adapt on the fly depending on where it wants to be, like what its out goal wants to be and the type of monsters it wants to produce. So you do need to be very, very clued up with where you want to go, how you want to do, how you want to get there, and then how you want to adapt when your opponent interacts with you, while also being able to try and interact with them so that they don't just go all out and then you go, right, okay, cool, passing game. Now, I'm not saying this is going to topple the meta, it's just one of them decks that if it goes off unchecked, it will be a massive issue, and that's when, if you go to a local environment where Nibiru isn't a thing, Droll isn't a thing, you're going to be able to do a little bit more, but you do need to kind of counter side for that, and that's where I think something like Cross Out onto a D-Barrier can be massively helpful for this deck, because something like D-Barrier is very hard to stop, especially if you're going second. What you don't want to happen is your opponent goes, draw face, D-Barrier, and you go, okay, guess I'm not doing anything, pass back to my opponent and they OTK you. So that's where I do feel the side deck comes into play. I don't think it's worth main decking Crossout Designator for specifically D-Barrier, but I would main it if you feel that the local environment you're going to are main decking Drolls, main decking, like you can play through Ashes, you can play through Imperms, you can play through certain hand traps. There will be ones that you will struggle against, and that will be stuff like Fluoros and everything else. But that's something you do need to keep in mind and then adapt it to the environment you're taking it to. Anyway, I hope this has been in as much depth as possible. Any questions at all, by all means, put them in the comments down below. I'll be more than happy to answer them. For now, as absolutely always, stay safe and, of course, happy dueling.